Dean Julia Bennell, and Julia is the Executive Dean at our Leeds Business School. She graduated in 1994 with first-class honors in mathematics and management science, and then received her PhD in management science in 1998 from the University of Swansea. So for those of you paying attention to the years, she was a fast mover in the academic sphere. She was then promoted to Professor of Management Science at the University of Southampton Business School in 2010. There she was the director of a Center of Operational Research, Management Science and Information Systems that was a UK leader in its area. She served as the head of the Department of Decision Analytics and Risk Research, and then 2018. At that point, she came to join us as our Deputy Dean and now our Executive Dean from January onward. In addition to her university roles, which include research and delivering teaching, she's a qualified executive coach and mentor. I give you now over to our Executive Dean, and her topic for today is business schools in a time of accelerated change. Now, I'd just like to say, if questions occur to you, you can see that if you hit the little purple button on the lower right-hand side, it'll open up a chat box. You can put your questions into the chat area, and we'll use those and also perhaps call on people as the hour goes along. But first, I give you our Dean.
Thank you, Gary. Hopefully you can all hear me. If not, I'm sure someone will tell me that they can't. So it's a great pleasure to be able to spend some time discussing with you the role of business schools, particularly as we emerge from the current crisis. Fingers crossed we will emerge from it soon. So I'm going to skip straight to my agenda. I'm going to warn you that it will take about 20 minutes for me to get through quite a deck of slides, but I'm going to move quite fast through a few of them. So so the first item is I've titled My Pandemic Story. So it's my reflections on leading the business school through a pandemic, although we're not quite out the other side. So I just want to talk a little bit about what it's been like leading LUBs for the last 5 months. What I go through is a little bit of a caricature and somewhat simplified, but I think it will resonate with many people, particularly those who've been leading other organisations during these last 5 months. And then this is just a really perfect example, I think, to illustrate the complexities of management and how it's hard anyway, but when you add a global pandemic, it really exposes some of the shortcomings of leadership and management in many aspects. And finally, to talk about accelerated but not different, to really put forward the argument that what we're seeing emerging from this is an acceleration of the changes that were already in place, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before I talk about any of that, I want to just say a little bit about me, because it gives some context to my pandemic story. So I'm a career academic. I won't say any more about that because Gary has beautifully summed up my academic career. But from a technical side, I am an operational researcher. Now, if people who may not be familiar with operational research, I'd say it's quite an eclectic mix as a discipline. It's really emerged from the war, where the idea was that you got lots of people in a room together, engineers, scientists, mathematicians, technical people, economists, behavioural people, and you got them all in the room together to solve a specific problem. And over time, it's emerged as a discipline with various methodologies associated with it, but all of them begged and borrowed and stolen from elsewhere. So I like to describe myself as a pragmatic mathematician. So I'm trained as a mathematician, but my use of mathematics is very much about trying to solve a problem rather than trying to research mathematics. A lot of what I do could be aligned with industrial engineering. I can program computers with a steadily decreasing competence, but never a commercial competence. I'd say I'm an amateur behavioural psychologist because it's always important to understand people when solving problems. And I use statistics, artificial intelligence, big data, and all sorts of other techniques. Where I think operational research really brings benefits is because it's very structured scientific thinking. So real world problems are messy, and in order to solve them, you need to be able to put structure around them. So what operational researchers do is they build models. They're very evidence-based in what they do, and all of what they do is client-driven. It's about solving real world problems. So that gives you a bit of background of really how I come at the world, and I think it will reflect a bit in my sort of pandemic story. So just to take you through the story now, as I said, it's a bit of a caricature, no disrespect to all my esteemed colleagues that I've been working with, but I think that there's some interesting truths we can all resonate with. So if I take you back to January, middle to the beginning to the end of January, we were all interested observers of this new flu virus that had emerged in Wuhan, but it felt very distant. While we recognised the possibilities of the impact, it was so abstract that it was a sort of side thought rather than really at the centre of our minds. And then come February, it started to get a bit more real. Things were a bit more serious now, and we really started thinking about what could happen. But grasping the dimensions of the problem, what the probability of all the different scenarios might be, was very, very hard. So it was very difficult to take any actions because we didn't really know what actions to take. So we were doing what if analysis, but really in a quite passive way. And then bam, 9th of March, the 10 days from the 9th of March will be very clearly on my mind for many years to come. We started meeting daily as a university executive and taking some really huge decisions that had never been taken in the whole history of the university. It was actually very calm, and my reflection here is we had a very clear objective. So we were in that crisis management mode, but not crisis in terms of in a panic, but we had to deal with what was in front of us and implement what we were going to implement now. So we weren't in the realm of predicting, we were in the realm of this is happening now, what are we going to do, and then taking action. So while it was an incredibly memorable experience, taking huge decisions, it was actually very clear. Moving on from that into April, May, it was quite different. We'd navigated lockdown, and we had a little bit of breathing space, but that breathing space gave us the opportunity to gather data and to start evaluating, bearing in mind that the stakes were high. Now we had a multi-dimension problem. We had different objectives, or a range of objectives, and their priorities were quite different depending on where you were coming from, which gives scope for the divergent views. So this was a much more interesting place, and a place of much debate and a lot of analysis, where we needed some really structured techniques to get hold of what was happening. But then reintroduce the burning platform, because while we had some breathing space, in the end, you do reach a point where you have to make a decision, and that's where we stripped it down to what really mattered and have the focus there. So while we had all of this analysis, lots of divergent views, huge debate, it was time to, depending on where you were, either agree or disagree, but commit to the way forward. And now it's about the benefit of hindsight. Well, we're not yet there yet. While there are lots of reflections and interesting lessons to think about, there will be much more to think about. So that's a real sort of quick story of the last 5 months and some of the key sort of processes that I felt we went through in terms of how to manage things. So the reason for putting up a picture of a brain is one of the things that I reflected on a lot was that it was very easy to start thinking from the limbic system. So here's the amateur psychologist in me, to think with a fight or flight and a quite emotional reaction, because the stakes were high, and it was very easy for your thoughts to be clouded with sometimes quite catastrophizing, and sometimes maybe blind optimism. And it was quite important to actually move to be thinking from your prefrontal cortex, your executive function, so needing to be structured and analytical. So what I did is I defaulted to my expertise, and that's, for me, is about building models. So I just want to take you through some models that I sat in my my attic room at home trying to help me get to grips with what was going on. So this is the first one. This is a mind map. I won't take you through the detail. You probably can't read it anyway. But I love mind maps. I think they're just a fantastic way of capturing lots of information and making you feel like you've got a little bit more control. So I used mind maps to really make sure that I got everything down, to feel a bit more structured, a little bit more analytical, and to just feel like I wasn't missing out anything, I was capturing anything. A lot of it is about the process rather than the end result. Another thing I did was build some systems models. This picture here probably won't make any sense at all, and I'm not going to take you through it. There's lots of information that underlay it, and this is like an abstraction, but it was really trying to reflect on the fact that there was lots of conflicting constraints, lots of different influences and trade-offs, and that the relationships needed to be formalized over a finite set of dimensions. And then once you could do that, you could start thinking about what your objective was, and depending on your objective, what different things you might do. So I found that very useful as well. And then the final one I'll present to you, among all the different things that I scrawled down while trying to get my head around what was going on, is decision making under uncertainty. So this is a really simple risk model about really trying to capture what the possible outcomes of the futures were, and then what your appetite for risk was given the consequences. So you would define a number of states of the world. Here I've got an optimistic and a pessimistic state, and then some alternative actions that you might take. But you can expand these to more states and more alternatives. And then depending on that, what's your appetite for risk? Do you just go for your maximum outcome, even though the downside might be quite bad? Or do you try to minimize your losses? And again, it's the process of building the model that I found particularly useful in really sort of capturing my thinking. So that was me. That was my way of trying to sort of cope with the situation that we found ourselves in, and trying to really get to grips with how to manage and lead. But I think one reflection I have is illustrated here in a pair of crutches. So people use their professional skills as a crutch. I spent many years working on leadership and team building type courses, which was about challenging participants to really use their management and leadership skills rather than use their professional skills. So somebody might be a fantastic accountant, fantastic engineer, fantastic economist, and they use those skills to compensate for not being so skilled in terms of their management and leadership. So you take away the crutches and then help them work a lot on their interpersonal skills. So these models were my crutches, and it was important to recognise that in order to be an effective leader of the business school and member of UEG, I had to do more than just use my models. I needed to use my leadership skills and understand what leadership style to use in different situations. I had to understand politicking and how to work through the university and work with different relationships in order to get my voice heard and make sure that I was doing the best for the business school as well as the best for the university. It took emotional intelligence, negotiation. I had to be very self-aware and reflective through this, and all sorts of other skills. And so it was really insightful and useful to think about that. And the other thing which I've just added to this slide here, it was a book I was reading earlier in the year about the five dysfunctions of a team. So it's not just about how you work as an individual, it's how you work in a team. And this book was saying that you need, in order for a team to be very effective, and this was about a senior leadership team, you needed trust to be able to be open, and then you can engage in passionate debate and conflict that's productive, which once everyone's been heard, everyone can commit. So you've got that disagree and commit, as well as it's what I wanted to commit to anyway. And then because people are committed, they'll be accountable and deliver on the results for the organisation. So that was a lightning fast summary of what was in that book. So all of these things became very important. But I think the one thing that the sort of one moment I had a number of weeks ago was just the renewed conviction that this is why we need business schools, because this stuff is really hard, it's really complicated, and we all draw from our own resources and our experience and our background and use all the interpersonal skills and we have available to us and our teams, but it's hard stuff, and there is a real place for business schools to be able to help manage this. So that's my story, and that brings me around to really what the purpose of a business school is. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. And again, I'm going to draw a picture because I quite like working in pictures. But at the core, we've got business schools and all sorts of other higher education schools would talk about knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination. This is really at the core and heart of our purpose. So the knowledge creation is about our research, it's about our thought leadership, and about developing theories, tools, developing skills as researchers, or helping or understanding how skills can be used in different contexts. And this is a really important part of our role. And then we've got the knowledge dissemination, which is our educational function, but also our dissemination of research, our knowledge transfer, to make sure that there are real beneficiaries of the work that we do. But that's not enough. It's certainly not enough for a business school in terms of what our purpose is and what we're about. So the next layer I've added in is to add another pillar, if you like. So we've got the pillars of research and teaching, and I've added the pillar of our external environment, which is our corporates, businesses, SMEs, public sector, third sector. These are really important partners in a business school and should take a really strong role in what we do, both within our research and our teaching. And my belief is it should be a real symbiotic relationship. So this isn't something that happens on the side or a nice to have, but that as a business school, what we teach and what we research should be firmly grounded in what we call the real world. We should be the real world. The business school should welcome the real world in and live in it. So in terms of these three pillars, our research should be collaborative. We should be making sure that we have impact by industry being beneficiaries and users of our research, but also collaborators in our research. And so in fact, this arrow here should be a two-way arrow, and so should this one with the teaching, because industry has a really fantastic role to play in supporting our educational portfolio, in transferring the knowledge that they have of their experience into our education program, as well as us delivering students and education into industry. And also we have a role to play in executive education, but reskilling and lifelong learning. So one of the things that I see us doing as a business school is being a convener and a collaborator. So being a place where organisations can come and find a community among themselves, so they have peer-to-peer learning and networking, as well as networking with our academics, and we can learn from each other. So I've just to add an extra layer to that, because it would be wrong to miss out our alumni, who are incredibly important and just a fantastic resource and something we should be very, very proud of. And our alumni can feed into our supporting our students and our programs, can support our research, as well as support our connections with industry. And also we've got other higher education research institutions, so we collaborate a lot with them, and we need to be partnering globally. And this is all on the foundation of the values of the university. I've just listed some here: ethics, sustainability, inclusivity, curiosity, really close to my heart, and academic freedom. Conscious of time, I put global mindset here because there was something about international that was really missing, and I didn't know where to fit it in among all the arrows, because I feel like it underpins everything we do. And we've got our staff at the heart, which is, if you like, the fourth pillar. Okay, so just on to the last of the 3 agenda points, which is talking about accelerated change. So emerging from the pandemic is not necessarily about embracing a new world, but instead about catching up with the acceleration of ongoing change. And while there was lots of change going on, and there was prior, I've picked out, I think, 4 key ones that I think were very much on the agenda and will be accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So the first one, digital and the rise of automation. According to McKinsey, they forecast that by 2030, tens of millions of jobs will be automated. Anything that is repetitive and can be algorithmically copied. But it's not all bad news. They also predict that there will be new jobs created, as many, if not more, in their place. What I find particularly interesting about that is that we are educating graduates to do jobs that don't currently exist. So how do we do that? What do we need to be teaching our students when we don't know what their future careers hold for them? The other phenomenon is around multi-stage careers and entrepreneurship. So the 3-stage life is no longer going to be relevant. For a start, we're all going to be working into our 70s, I expect. And along that time, it won't be a case of being in education for full time for the first period of our life, and then in work for the next period, and then retired. It's going to be much more multi-staged. So according to Carrington Crisp report last year, 84% of students believe they will need to learn new skills or be reskilled to advance their career in the future, and 50% expect to change career completely at some point. 56% of students expect to start a business or work for themselves. So how do we serve a community of learners which is not 18 to 21-year-olds in full-time education on campus? And we need to think about how we're going to serve that community and how we serve it, given the wide range of different backgrounds and stages of life people might be in. Sustainability and carbon net zero. Well, this was the most pressing item on most of the world's agenda, not all of it, but most of the world's agenda pre-COVID, and that's not going away by any means. And and while you hear wonderful reports of how COVID-19 has reduced pollution, I don't think it will have particularly slowed down global warming. However, it has taught us a lot about how to work differently, and in itself has provided some opportunities for accelerating us addressing the sustainability and carbon net zero agenda. And then finally, ethical awareness and human kindness. Well, we've seen lots of evidence of a upsurge of human kindness through the global pandemic. I don't think this came from nowhere. I think we were already on that journey. And it's certainly reported that Generation Z want to work for employers who are socially responsible, and values is very high on their list of selecting which organisations they want to work for. So just 2 more slides to sort of look at what sort of things we should be thinking about. So around the automation and digitization, we need to think about valuable complex skills, things that aren't going to be automated, that we should be developing in our students, around emotional intelligence, social skills, dealing with ambiguity and uncertainty, and so on and so on. So as a university, we do need to focus on those skills development, and one where they can be lifelong learners. So they need to be able to continue to embrace education all throughout their lives. They need to be able to understand and deal with risk and ambiguity, and also thinking systemically. I think these are really important things around, and also the self-awareness piece is important to develop within our students. Opportunities to keep learning. As I said, accessibility to a wide range of circumstances, so much more digital and hybrid style learning as we offer opportunities for people to re-enter and leave and upskill, so open to all ages and varied backgrounds. We already focus a lot on entrepreneurial skills for our students, but I was interested to learn that probably the age group who are most likely to start a new business are those in their 50s. So how do we go about supporting these people? Because maybe not a place, they don't traditionally look to universities for that kind of support. And then understanding diversity in the workplace. So the global mindset and cultural awareness that we really need to be mindful on. So how do we create an international experience and develop that global mindset, while students may well be staying in the UK and not travelling as much? And then the social responsibility side. Higher education and further education both have a huge responsibility to develop students who are socially responsible, ethically aware, and environmentally literate. And as far as I'm concerned, that's just what we should be doing. It's the right thing to do. We need to embed UN sustainability goals in our curriculum and make sure they're well understood, and be looking hard now at the work around decolonising the curriculum and making sure that we are creating an environment that welcomes a diverse set of people and is fully inclusive. So I've said on here, Generation Z no longer forms opinions of companies solely based on the quality of their products, services, but now on their ethics, practices, and social impact. And that was by Deloitte last year. So I'm going to leave it there.